The conference room was buzzing, that low hum of corporate anxiety that always precedes a big announcement. My father, Richard, stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, beaming like he'd just won the lottery. He adjusted his tie, a silk monstrosity I'd bought him for a birthday he barely acknowledged, and cleared his throat. My entire team, the best software development unit in the company, sat around me. They were nervous, exchanging uneasy glances. They knew a restructuring was coming, but they thought their stellar performance made them untouchable. They were loyal. They were brilliant. And in about 5 minutes, they were all going to be jobless. Richard's eyes scanned the room, deliberately skipping over me, and landed on my brother, Mark, who was sitting smugly beside him. As you all know, Richard began, his voice full of fake gravitas, in order to innovate, we must evolve. To reach new heights, we must be willing to make bold changes. He paused for dramatic effect. That is why, effective immediately, we are dissolving the Apex division. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. My team stared at me in disbelief, their faces a mixture of shock and betrayal. I kept my expression perfectly neutral. I just watched my father, my boss, detonate the most profitable part of his own company. He then put a proud hand on my brother's shoulder. And I'm thrilled to announce our new golden hire, Mark, who will be leading a new, leaner, more agile team into the future. They didn't know the Apex division wasn't just a part of their company. Its core contracts were tied directly to me and the key personnel on my team. You're probably wondering why a father would fire his own high-performing daughter and her team just to give his unqualified son a job. To understand that, you have to understand the lie my family had been living for 20 years. My family operated on a simple, unspoken rule. My brother, Mark, was the sun, and I was a distant functional planet. He was born golden. I was born to serve. While he was praised for breathing, I was criticized for not breathing quietly enough. He was all charisma and charm, a walking, talking embodiment of unearned confidence. When he scraped by with C's in school, my parents celebrated his social intelligence. When I graduated at the top of my class with a degree in computer engineering, my father asked me when I was going to find a husband. Mark was an investment in the family's image. I was a utility, like the plumbing or the electricity. You don't notice it until it breaks, and you only ever call on it when you need something fixed. That's exactly how I ended up at my father's company, Sterling Solutions. It wasn't an offer, it was a summons. The company, which sold outdated inventory management systems, was bleeding money and falling behind the times. My father, a classic salesman who thought charisma could solve a server crash, was technically illiterate. He didn't understand the digital age that was rapidly making his business obsolete. So, he called on me. Not with a generous job offer, not with a senior title, but with a demand disguised as a family obligation. We need to keep this in the family, he'd said, which was code for, I need your brain, but I'm not going to pay market value for it or give you any real authority. So I joined. I was given a small office in the back, a meager salary, and the monumental task of dragging Sterling Solutions into the 21st century. Mark, meanwhile, was off finding himself in Southeast Asia on my parents' dime. I was told to be grateful for the opportunity. For 5 years, I worked in the shadows. I designed and built a new proprietary software from scratch. It was sleek, efficient, and years ahead of our competitors. I called it the Apex system. I single-handedly created the division to support it, hand-picking and training every member of my team. I was the architect of the company's salvation, but my name was never mentioned in board meetings. All the credit, all the praise, went straight to my father. He was the visionary. I was just the girl in the back office who was good with computers. The Apex division became my life. While my father was out on the golf course sealing deals with handshakes and empty promises, my team and I were in the trenches, coding, debugging, and innovating. We pulled 80-hour weeks, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared mission. I wasn't just a manager. I was a mentor, a strategist, and a shield. When the broader company tried to poach my best people for dull legacy projects, I fought for them. When they deserved raises, I went to war with HR. In return, I earned something my father's money could never buy: genuine loyalty. They didn't work for Sterling Solutions, they worked for me. About 2 years in, the company hit a wall. A cash flow crisis, a consequence of my father's poor planning, brought us to the brink of bankruptcy. He was panicking, preparing for massive layoffs. It was then that I saw an opportunity. Our biggest competitor had just fumbled a major product launch, leaving their largest client, a national logistics giant called Omnicorp, furious and looking for an exit. My father wanted to send them a fruit basket. I told him we could offer them a full-scale, seamless migration to our Apex system in under 60 days. He laughed at me. "That's impossible," he said. "Don't waste their time." I ignored him. I spent a week with my team, creating a custom proof of concept, mapping out every single step of the migration. I used a back channel to get our proposal in front of Omnicorp's CTO. He was skeptical, but agreed to a 30-minute virtual meeting. That meeting lasted 3 hours. They were blown away. 2 weeks later, we signed the largest contract in Sterling Solutions history. That one deal single-handedly saved the company. It didn't just erase our debt, it made us an industry leader overnight. At the lavish press conference, my father took the stage and spoke of my vision and my bold strategy. My team and I watched from the back. Our reward? An email from my father with the subject line, "Great teamwork," and a coupon for a free large pizza. It was then I knew. I wasn't just undervalued. I was being actively exploited. My success was just raw material for his ego. The pizza party was a turning point. It became clear that as long as I was under my father's roof, both literally and professionally, I would never be seen as anything more than a glorified repairman. I started making quiet preparations, building a safety net for myself and my team, should the day ever come. That day arrived sooner than I expected, in the form of my brother Mark. He returned from his latest failed venture, a disastrous attempt to launch a line of ethically sourced, artisanal dog water, with his tail between his legs and his hand out for more of my parents' money. He was 30 years old with the resume of a teenager. He decided he was done with the startup grind and wanted a real job. He set his sights on my division. He started hanging around the office, offering unsolicited and idiotic advice. He told my lead engineer that our user interface should have more sizzle and suggested we replace our complex algorithms with a good vibes-based system. My team tolerated him with professional patience, but I could see their frustration. Mark knew nothing about technology, business, or hard work. But he knew how to charm our father. He'd sit in Richard's office for hours, talking about synergy and disruption, words he'd picked up from podcasts. The betrayal was delivered over a Sunday roast. "We have wonderful news," my mother announced, beaming. My father, looking immensely proud, declared, "Mark has shown a real passion for the tech side of the business. I've decided to make him the new head of the Apex division." I stared at him, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The room went silent. I thought it was a joke, a profoundly stupid and cruel one, but a joke nonetheless. It wasn't. "He has a fresh perspective," my father continued, avoiding my eyes. "He's not bogged down in the technical weeds like some people. He's a big-picture thinker." I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. When I started to protest, to lay out the insanity of handing a multi-million-dollar division to a man who thought a server farm was a place where they grew vegetables, my mother cut me off. She pulled me into the kitchen. "Don't make a scene," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "Your brother needs this. He's had a hard time. You're strong. You've always been capable. It's your duty to support him. Don't be selfish." Selfish. After everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed, they called me selfish for wanting to keep my own job. The next morning, I walked into my father's office and closed the door behind me. I didn't come with accusations or family drama. I came with a business case. I had my tablet ready, loaded with every metric that mattered. Year-over-year revenue growth, client acquisition costs, customer satisfaction scores, and team performance analytics. I laid it all out for him, my voice even and professional. I showed him in stark, undeniable numbers that the Apex division was not just successful, but that its success was inextricably linked to the specific talent and workflow my team and I had cultivated. "Look at the data," I said calmly. "Our client retention is at 98%. That's not because of the Sterling Solutions brand name, it's because of our service and the relationships my team has built. Removing us, especially to install someone with zero experience, will cause a catastrophic loss of confidence. Clients will leave." He didn't even glance at the screen. He leaned back in his leather chair, a throne of ignorance, and steepled his fingers. "I appreciate the effort you put into this," he said, the condescension dripping from his voice. "But you're missing the point. This isn't about spreadsheets." "Then what is it about?" I pressed. "Because from a business perspective, this is corporate suicide." His face hardened. "It's about family. It's about loyalty. Something you clearly don't understand." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "Mark is my son. He deserves a chance to prove himself, and I'm going to give it to him. Blood is thicker than spreadsheets, and it's certainly thicker than your ambition." The accusation hung in the air. He saw my competence not as an asset, but as a threat to his precious golden child. He saw my defense of my work as selfish ambition. "I built this division from nothing," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I saved this company. This isn't ambition. It's a fact." That was the wrong thing to say. He slammed his hand on the desk. "You've always been jealous of him, and ungrateful, after everything I've given you," he roared. "Here's my final word. You will step aside. You will train Mark and give him your full support. If you refuse, I will personally escort you out of this building and disband your entire team. You are either with this family, or you are against it." He stood there, red-faced and righteous, having given me the clearest choice of my life. I walked out of his office and didn't look back. The choice he'd given me wasn't a choice at all. It was a release. The final thread of familial obligation, worn thin over decades of neglect, finally snapped. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The time for pleading was over. The time for planning was here. That evening, I sent a simple text to my 5 most senior team members, the architects and engineers who had built Apex with me. "Private dinner, my treat, the bistro on Elm Street, 8 p.m. Urgent." When they were all gathered in the quiet back room I'd reserved, I didn't waste any time. I laid it out, sparing no details. "Richard is giving the division to my brother," I said. "Mark is going to be our new boss. His plan is to dissolve our current team structure and then, eventually, replace us. He sees us as a threat to his son." The shock on their faces quickly curdled into fury. These were the people who had sacrificed nights and weekends, who had poured their brilliance into every line of code. They had been fiercely loyal, and they were being thrown away like garbage. "He can't do that," my lead engineer David said. "The clients will revolt. Omnicorp's entire operation runs on our direct support." "I know," I said, letting a small smile touch my lips for the first time all day. "And that's the point." I then explained the contingency plan I had put in place 2 years ago, right after the pizza party. I told them about my separate, legally established consulting firm, sitting dormant, waiting. More importantly, I told them about the contracts. "Remember the Omnicorp deal? And the 3 big ones we signed after that?" I asked. I drafted the technical and service level agreements for all of them. Buried deep in Section 7, subsection B, is a key person clause. I explained that the clause stipulated that if I, as head of development, and at least 2 of my senior engineers were no longer in direct management of the account, The client had the right to terminate the contract for cause with just 30 days' notice. My father, in his haste to claim victory, had signed everyone without reading the operational fine print. "He's not firing you," I told them, my voice low and steady. "I am offering you all positions at my new company. Better titles, better pay, and equity. He thinks he's dissolving a division. He has no idea he's about to lose his entire company." There was no hesitation. In that dimly lit restaurant, a pact was formed. My 5 lieutenants went to work, and over the next 48 hours, they discreetly met with every single member of the Apex team. The story was the same, and so was the reaction. Shock, anger, and then a fierce, unwavering loyalty. Every last one of them signed their new employment contracts with my company, Innovate Apex, post-dated and ready. We were no longer a division, we were an exodus waiting to happen. The following 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception. By day, we were the picture of defeated compliance. I dutifully began training Mark. It was a farce. I'd ask him to review a technical schematic, and he'd stare at it blankly before suggesting we make it more visually appealing. I gave him access to a development server to get a feel for the code, and within an hour he'd managed to crash it by trying to change the system's font to Comic Sans. He was a child playing with a loaded weapon, and I was the dutiful sister handing him polished, empty cartridges to play with, while my team and I quietly removed the real ammunition from the building. At night, my real work began. From a small, temporary office space we rented across town, we were a flurry of activity. We set up our new cloud infrastructure, migrated our development tools, and drafted transition plans for our clients. The most critical part was the communication. I personally called my main contacts at Omnicorp and our other key accounts. I was careful, professional. "As a courtesy," I'd say, "I'm letting you know about an impending internal restructuring at Sterling. As per our service agreement, I want to assure you that my team and I are fully committed to a smooth continuation of your services, regardless of our corporate banner." The CTOs and VPs I spoke to were not fools. They understood the subtext immediately. The message from each of them was essentially the same. "We hired your team, not your father's company. Keep us informed." On the final morning, the day of the big announcement, the air in our part of the office was thick with unspoken electricity. Each of my 15 team members had a signed resignation letter in their bag. I had 3 emails queued up in my drafts folder, addressed to the legal departments of our 3 biggest clients. The subject line for each was identical: "Notice of contract termination pursuant to key person clause." All I had to do was press send. We walked into the conference room, sat down, and waited for my father to light the fuse. We are back in that conference room. The air was stale with forced smiles. My father, Richard, stood at the podium, basking in the attention. He launched into a speech filled with the kind of empty corporate jargon he loved. He spoke of synergistic alignment, proactive paradigms, and disrupting the status quo. It was a word salad designed to obscure the simple, ugly truth. He was gutting the company's engine to make his favorite son feel important. "And that is why," he announced, his voice booming with false confidence, "we are dissolving the Apex division to make way for a more agile future." My team remained perfectly still, their faces impassive masks. I could feel the eyes of the other department heads on us, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "Please join me in thanking them for their service," he added, a dismissive wave in our direction. Then came the grand finale. He gestured to my brother, who practically preened in his chair. "And now, it is my immense pleasure to introduce the visionary who will lead this new era of innovation, my son, Mark." A smattering of confused, obligatory applause filled the silence. Mark stood up and gave a little wave, a king accepting a throne he hadn't earned. But my father wasn't done. In a final act of hubris, he turned his smiling gaze on me. "And now I'd like to invite my daughter to the podium," to say a few words and to officially pass the torch, to show her support for her brother and this exciting new chapter. He thought he was pinning me. He thought he could force me to publicly bless my own humiliation. It was his greatest miscalculation. I stood and walked calmly to the front of the room. I adjusted the microphone, the small squeak of feedback the only sound. I looked past my brother, past my father, and addressed the room. "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice clear and cold. "You spoke of bold changes. I agree. A bold change is needed." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But this is not a new chapter of innovation. This is a fatal error in judgment, and it is a direction I will not be a part of. Effective immediately, I tender my resignation." Before the shock could even register on my father's face, David, my lead engineer, stood up. "I resign too." Then Maria, our client relations lead. "I resign." Then another, and another. "I'm with her." "I resign." In perfect, disciplined succession, all 15 members of my team stood up, a silent, unbreachable wall of defiance. We were not fired. We had just quit. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. For a long moment, no one moved. The other employees stared, their faces a canvas of fear and awe. My father's jaw was slack, his proud, beaming expression having collapsed into a mask of utter disbelief. Mark just looked lost, his eyes darting between me and our father, a spoiled child suddenly realizing the game was real, and he had already lost. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My father finally found his voice, a strangled whisper. "Sit down. All of you, sit down right now." No one moved. I ignored him. I calmly reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and unlocked it. In the dead quiet, the soft clicks of the screen were as loud as gunshots. I opened my email drafts, the 3 messages sitting there, ready. With my team standing like statues behind me, I pressed send, then send, then send again. The trap was sprung. Less than a minute later, a loud buzz vibrated across the mahogany table. It was Richard's phone. He fumbled for it, his hands trembling. As he stared at the screen, all the color drained from his face. At that exact moment, the projector he'd used for his triumphant presentation, which was still on, pinged with an email notification visible to the entire room. There, in huge letters, was the preview. From Legal Debt, Omnicorp. Subject, urgent. Notice of contract termination, pursuant to key person clause. Another ping, then a third. My father looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with horror and dawning comprehension. He looked at me, his expression pleading for it not to be true. I stepped back to the microphone. "Let me explain what just happened," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You thought the Apex division was an asset you owned. You were wrong. It was a team of people, and their value was based on trust. Trust you just broke. The contracts for Omnicorp, for Viridian Logistics, for an entire portfolio of clients that makes up 75% of this company's annual revenue, were all contingent on me and my senior staff remaining in place. You didn't fire us, Richard. You just gave our clients the legal right to fire you." The rage finally erupted. You did this!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You backstabbing, breaking-eye, treacherous." "I built your success," I said, my voice dropping, devoid of all heat. "And now I'm taking it with me. Enjoy your new, agile future." I turned my back on him. My team parted for me, and together, we walked out of the conference room, leaving a man and his golden child to drown in the consequences of their choices. The walk out of that building felt like shedding a heavy skin I'd been forced to wear my whole life. There was no sadness, no regret. There was only the clean, sharp air of freedom. We didn't look back. We went directly to our new office, a bright modern space I had leased weeks prior, and got to work. For us, it was just another Tuesday. For my father, it was the beginning of the end. The collapse of Sterling Solutions was swift and brutal. The news of a mass walkout led by the company's core technical team, followed by the immediate termination of their 3 largest contracts, sent shockwaves through our small industry. My father's attempts at damage control were pathetic. He had no product to sell and no one qualified to support the few legacy clients he had left. Mark, my visionary brother, lasted exactly 5 days. Faced with angry phone calls and actual work, he buckled. He sent our father a text message claiming the toxic environment was stifling his creativity, and went back to his true calling: spending our parents' dwindling money. Within 2 weeks, my father had laid off half of the remaining staff. The vibrant office I had known, the one whose profits I had single-handedly generated, became a corporate graveyard. The best of the laid-off employees, talented people from sales, marketing, and administration who I knew and respected, sent me their resumes. I hired them. Meanwhile, Innovate Apex was soaring. We didn't have to build momentum, we simply transferred it. Our clients were delighted. The transition was seamless because we were the system. There were no learning curves, no data migration issues. We were a plug-and-play solution. Our press release announcing our launch was picked up by tech journals, framing us as a dynamic new startup born from innovation. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, signing new clients who had been on the fence about dealing with my father's outdated company. I was now the CEO of the fastest-growing tech firm in the region. My father was the CEO of a hollowed-out shell, a monument to his own ego and foolishness. I had taken the engine he had tried to hijack, and I'd built a better, faster car around it, leaving him stranded on the side of the road with his golden trophy, which had turned out to be made of lead. About a month after our exodus, my receptionist buzzed my office. "There's a Richard and a woman here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. "They don't have an appointment, but they insist it's urgent." I knew this day would come. "Send them up," I said, standing from my desk. I didn't meet them in the privacy of my office. I met them in the middle of our open-plan workspace, with my entire team, my loyal and brilliant team, as silent witnesses. They looked awful. My father's expensive suit hung on him, his face gaunt and gray. My mother's eyes were puffy and red. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly desperation. "We need to talk," my father began, his voice raspy. "You have to stop this. You have to come back. We can fix this, merge the companies. Save the family legacy." When I just stared at him blankly, his desperation curdled into a pathetic threat. "If you don't, I'll sue you. You stole my clients, my property." "Your property?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "These clients left because you violated the terms of their service agreements. The only thing I stole was the talent you threw in the trash. You have no legal standing, Richard, and you're embarrassing yourself." That's when my mother stepped forward, turning on the waterworks. "How can you be so cold?" she cried, her voice trembling for all to hear. "This is your family. We raised you, we fed you, and you do this to us? You destroy your father's life's work? For what? For money?" She gestured wildly at my thriving office. "You have everything, and you've left us with nothing." I let her finish, let the silence hang for a moment. "You're wrong," I said finally, my voice cutting through her performance. "You didn't leave me with nothing. You left me with a lesson. You taught me that my worth to you was conditional. You taught me that my successes were only valuable as long as they could be credited to you or sacrificed for Mark. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a safety net. You made your decision in that conference room. You chose the son you loved over the daughter you used. The family you're talking about was a lie. I'm just no longer participating in it." I turned to my head of security, who was already approaching. "Please show them out. They're trespassing." Being escorted out of my office was their final humiliation, but it wasn't the end of their consequences. I focused on my work, on my team, and on building the future I deserved. 6 months later, I received a call from a liquidation attorney. Sterling Solutions was officially, irrevocably bankrupt. The bank had seized all remaining assets to be sold at auction to cover a fraction of the debt. The assets included the office building, the company name, and all its intellectual property. But there was another, larger debt my father had incurred in a desperate last-ditch effort to stop the bleeding. A massive business loan he'd taken out just after we left. My company, through a third-party acquisitions firm, bought the entire asset portfolio of Sterling Solutions for less than the cost of the office furniture. I now owned the building my father built, the desk he once sat at, and the name he had ruined. A week later, I had my assistant schedule one final meeting. I summoned my father, my mother, and Mark to my new executive office, the one that used to be his. They entered looking like ghosts, defeated and hollow. They sat in the chairs opposite the desk where my father had once reigned. I let the silence stretch before sliding a folder across the polished wood. "This," I said, tapping the first document, "is the deed of sale. I own the company. I own this building." I slid out a second paper. "This is the emergency loan you took out to cover payroll after we left." Then I slid out the third and final page. "And this is the collateral you put up against that loan." My mother gasped. It was the deed to their house, the beautiful home I grew up in, the stage for all their praise of Mark and all their dismissal of me. "The bank called in the debt," I stated, my voice flat, betraying no emotion. "The collateral is forfeit. They are foreclosing. You have 30 days to vacate the property." My father finally broke. A dry, rattling sob escaped his chest. Mark stared blankly at the paper, as if it were written in a language he couldn't comprehend. My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading for the last time. "Please," she whispered. "You can't. It's our home." I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "I'm not doing anything," I said, my back to them. "I'm not taking your home. Your decisions took your home. Your pride, your delusion, your cruelty. All I did was stop paying the price for them." I turned to face them one last time, 3 strangers sitting in my office. "You built this. Now you get to live in it."